千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. As always, I want to extend my welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we are ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. In the writing of the Tao Te Ching, there is a legend associated with that. And I want to share that legend with you about how the Tao Te Ching was written. The story took place, of course, 2,500 years ago during the Warring Stage period. It took place at a setting called the Hangu Pass, Hangu Guan. The image that you see here is taken from the actual pass. The characters that you see there is from right to left, whereas in this slide presentation, the Chinese that you have seen is written from left to right. Both orders are okay, are usable. It doesn't need to follow one direction or the other, but I wanted to make sure everyone knew. So let's go to Hangu Guan, the Hangu Pass. 2,500 years ago, it was a typical day at the Hangu Pass, with no more or less than the usual traffic passing through. There were people leaving or entering the kingdom. Yingxi, the commander of the pass, looked over the travelers with watchful eyes. He was especially careful because recently he heard news that war was coming. That gave him reason to be especially alert. The commander saw an old man riding an ox and approaching slowly. He sensed something different about this old man. He followed this intuition. He walked up to the old man and he raised a hand to halt. He said, "What is your name?" Unlike most of the people the commander dealt with, the old man had a perfectly composed demeanor. The old man was not pompous, nor was he ingratiating. He said, "I am Li Er." The name rang a bell for the commander of the pass. He suddenly realized what his intuition was telling him. He said, "Are you not the one they call Lao Tzu, the old master?" The yeoman's expression showed a flicker of reluctance because he did not wish to draw attention to himself. He nodded. "Yes." "This is a great honor." The commander was overjoyed. He bowed deeply. He said, "I'm a student of the Tao. And I hear people say that you teach the Tao with divinely inspired powers." Lao Tzu smiled at this and said, "Commander, let us not be too hasty in believing what people say." The commander said, "You must have tea with me, master, before you resume your journey." "I insist." Lao Tzu saw the sincerity in this invitation and gladly accepted. They went into the office of the pass. The commander said, Master, I am most curious about how you gained your legendary wisdom. He made small talk as he boiled water for tea. Lao Tzu said, I claim no wisdom whatsoever. Others may get that impression only because I have served as the king's royal archivist over the years. Yes, the commander said, you won the position due to your ability to remember and summarize all the books you have ever read. You must possess incredible knowledge. Lao Tzu said, the Tao is not about pursuing knowledge. It is about returning to simplicity. There are certainly many books in the royal archives. Those books by themselves have no power to capture the essence of the Tao. The commander tried to imagine many books, found that he could not. He said, Master, I find it difficult to even imagine all these books in one place. Only a king can amass such a collection. I am lucky if I see just one book. A library of books, that would be beyond my comprehension. Lao Tzu said, books are dead things, Commander. They contain the words of people long gone. The only way to gain living wisdom from dead books is by applying their words to your life. So the commander nodded. Yes, Master. Nevertheless, I suspect there are many scholars who desire unlimited access to the books for themselves, like you have. Surely they wish to oust you from your position in order to take over? Lao Tzu said, yes, that is true. The position may seem like one of prestige, but in fact, it can be one of danger. Then the commander said, Master, you have survived all these years and thrived as the royal archivist. What is your secret? Lao Tzu said, there is no secret. I use the Tao. Anyone can do the same thing. Avoid danger and enjoy peace just by diligent cultivation of the Tao. As they were talking, the hot tea was poured into 2 cups. The commander said, well, in that case, you should be able to maintain his position for many years to come. Lao Tzu said, no, my work for the king is done. I can retire. Things being the way they are right now, I see no reason to remain. And this was the first indication that the commander had that Lao Tzu was not just traveling, he was actually leaving everything behind. He said, Master, I envy your freedom. I hear about the impending war as well. And I'm thinking about going away, but I'm tied to my property and career. Lao Tzu said, such is the nature of desires and attachments. What you desire tends to blind you. Letting go of the desire tends to free you. Lao Tzu sat back and sipped his tea. The commander shook his head. It is a pity, Master, that you are leaving, because I myself and many others can learn much from you. Then an idea occurred to him. Master, would you consider writing down some notes for us so we can cultivate the Tao on our own? That is an excellent idea, Lao Tzu said. I can write down summaries of all the major works in the Royal Archives. I can also include the advice that I have given the king over the years, because that advice was based on the Tao as well. This was a little puzzling to the commander. He said, "Would such advice apply to me, master? After all, I am no king." But Lao Tzu said, "Certainly, it applies. The scope may change, but the Tao remains the same, no matter who you are. Royalty or commoner, it makes no difference to the Tao." So upon that agreement to share his vast knowledge, Lao Tzu began to work. He leveraged his incredible memory and understanding to create one concise chapter after another. Each chapter was a highly refined and condensed distillation of a major principle, a notable book, or a discussion with the king. Finally, after many hours, it was done. Lao Tzu gave the commander the manuscript, bamboo slips. The commander could not believe it. What he held in his hands was the private library of a king condensed into a very compact form. It was as if Lao Tzu had squeezed all the treasures in the royal vault into a diamond and handed it over to him. Lao Tzu said farewell, mounted the ox to continue on his way. The commander called out after him, "Master, master, how can I thank you for this gift? Will I ever see you again?" Lao Tzu smiled back at him. Lao Tzu said, "This gift is a dead thing too. In that respect, it is no different from the other books. Remember, you can make it come alive by putting what it says into actual practice. When you do that, you will see me in the Tao." The commander looked on as Lao Tzu receded from view. Neither one of them realized that the gift was destined to become a spiritual cornerstone, not just for the ancient Chinese, but for all mankind. Neither one realized that one of the most significant events in human history had just taken place. This day that started out seeming like a typical day at the Hangu Pass turned out to be not so typical after all. The end. So that was the legend behind the writing of the Tao Te Ching. There are many parts to the legend that we should look into in an analysis. First, Hangu Guan. The Hangu Pass was the western gate of the Zhou Kingdom. In order to leave the Zhou Kingdom, you have to pass one of the gates. And if you were heading out to Western lands, Hangu Guan would be that pass. As I mentioned, there are multiple versions of this legend. Some have been distorted. I would even say badly distorted. For instance, there is a version that says the commander at the pass threw Lao Tzu in jail and forced Lao Tzu to write the Tao Te Ching before releasing him. This is a highly unlikely version. for a couple of reasons, for a couple of common sense reasons. It was based on the fact, this distortion was based on the fact that in ancient times, officials tended to dominate the people. However, Lao Tzu was not just anyone. He was the royal archivist, and at the time of the encounter, the commander of the pass had no idea that he was no longer that he had left the position. Therefore, for all he knew, Lao Tzu still commanded power and authority. That's number one. Number two, respect and reverence for the teacher, for the master, is as old as ancient culture of the Chinese itself, going back many more thousand years, even before the time of Lao Tzu. Just by the fact of being who he was, an accomplished scholar, a great teacher, Lao Tzu would naturally command respect, naturally, everywhere he went. He would not be thrown in jail and threatened with imprisonment unless he wrote the Tao Te Ching. As a student of the Tao, the commander was, of course, very respectful. And there are multiple conversations, multiple points from the conversation that he had with Lao Tzu that we should definitely pay attention to. They reflect on the teachings of the Tao that we should absorb. First, Lao Tzu practiced what he taught, did not wish to draw attention. Lao Tzu had, despite his status, despite his position, Lao Tzu had the practice in the Tao of humility. He did not draw attention to himself. He wanted to be treated just like everyone else that was passing through the gate. And he also did not claim to be wise. He did not accept the compliment that people say he taught the Tao with divine powers. And furthermore, when he talked about leaving behind everything to pursue freedom, that is another key point from the study of the Tao, is in recognizing the dynamic between attachments and freedom. More attachments, less freedom. Less attachments, more freedom. That's the way it works. Other points from the story that we should pay attention to, for instance, the Tao is not about knowledge. A common mistake back in those days, as well as in ancient times. Yet another thing to note in the background of the story is that this was before the invention of paper. That meant books, scrolls were rare, and they were not made of paper at all. They were two materials used for writing surface. One was silk, the other was bamboo slips. Basically, you cut open bamboo, you arrange them into vertical slips, you tie them together, and that forms a writing surface. Because they were rare, they were time-consuming to make, only the most wealthy and or powerful could have a collection of them. This was also why the Tao Te Ching was written to be so concise. Back in those days, the rarity of writing surface meant that you had to be very careful in choosing what you write on the writing surface. You have to pick and choose what you say carefully to not waste the little precious surface that you have. You have to automatically summarize everything you want to say, represent the most with the least. Then another important point was about the Tao. The Tao didn't care if you were emperor, king, commoner, whatever. The Tao applied to all. And the Tao was not, as I mentioned, about the accumulation of knowledge. Book knowledge, as Zhuangzi said, was limited. All the ancient sages, Lao Tzu, Zhuangzi, all agreed on this particular point. The pursuit of knowledge can actually take one further away from the Tao. If one were to be attached or obsess over the dead knowledge in books and not put them to use, one is essentially wasting time. Knowledge is meant to be applied, then they come alive. Knowledge comes alive only when we apply it to life. And then, lastly, as Lao Tzu was departing, he emphasized this very point. If you wish to partake in the wisdom of the Tao or Lao Tzu himself, all you really have to do is look at the Tao Te Ching, learn from it, and actually use what's in it. This story was drawn from the introduction of my translation. I know there are still many people who don't have this book, and I know I've never done a video or analysis on the story, so I very much appreciate the opportunity to do so today. This was the legend about the writing of the Tao Te Ching. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.